Okay. So welcome one, welcome all, from the fruit of your labors to the pointless output of your frustrations and nightmares. It is Handkerchief Dynasty, episode 121. We're going to have to rename this podcast, though, because Handkerchief Dynasty was very much in the theme of the frustration of being an Oilers fan, partially. So now that we're in it, we might want to call it, like, what? The greatest team of our lives?
No, I think we should stick with Handkerchief Dynasty.
Do you think that might affect search engine optimization if we just change the name randomly to something like super generic, like the Hockey Pod?
I just think Handkerchief Dynasty is a name that was earned. You know what I mean? It was earned. It's the reason this podcast exists is because of the Handkerchief Dynasty, right? It's because we used our handkerchiefs for so many years, and a handkerchief can be used for more than just sadness, right? It can also be used to wipe away tears of joy and ecstasy.
Exactly. So we're really more on the joy ecstasy side of things now, or at least getting down that path. In any case, let me intro. We got the High Priest of Oilers Magic, as well as Zach Laing, the prestigious Zach Laing, returning for episode 121. You were here for our first sexily visual episode, I see.
Yeah, I helped break that ground. It was an absolute honor.
We were making history, as I recall you pointing out. Like, how has it been to kind of feel the honeymoon of the crest of that breaking of history? Like, have people been just like talking to you in the street about it?
It's been nonstop, really. I get phone calls every day. People on Twitter are always like, Zach, what was it like? You know, you got to be on the first ever video Handkerchief Dynasty podcast, and I just tell them it was the crowning jewel of my entire career thus far. So it's a pleasure to be back here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you back. We're going into this little 3-game series against Montreal. I mean, we should probably start savoring, because I believe this is our last 3-game series of the year, if I'm not mistaken, correct? So it could be our last 3-game series ever. It's important to keep in mind, like, we're probably never going to see, unless we meet them in the playoffs or something, we're probably not going to play 3 consecutive games against the Montreal Canadiens for the rest of our natural lives. Of course, once we reach our unnatural lives, with once Cyberdyne Systems upgrade us to the T800 model, we might see it at that point, but that could be 200 years from now. How do you guys like our chances, first of all, against Montreal? Why don't we start there?
I like it, honestly. I mean, this is a completely different Edmonton Oilers team that we saw from the beginning of the year, full stop, right? I mean, I was very, very impressed with the 2 wins against Winnipeg this last week. Edmonton came in and played a style of game that, we haven't seen them play in a very, very, very long time. Like, they shut down the Winnipeg offense. They clogged up the neutral zones really, really well. They played that defense first game, and in turn, they were able to come back and win both games in a big way. So I think Montreal is going to be a great test to kind of see, okay, let's try and take this a step further now. Obviously, Edmonton had that, poor 3-game stretch against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Leafs have, of course, gone, what is it, like 2-7 over the last 9 games or something like that.
Which we predicted on the podcast. We said, in a few weeks, Toronto could be looking totally different. Whereas last week they were ready to just like rename the country the Toronto Maple Leafs land.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So, you come out of a strong 2-game set against one of the other top teams in the North in Winnipeg. And now you get another great test here with Montreal. So, they've been a bit of an up and down team, just like everybody seemingly has this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I think it's going to be a really critical 3-game set to kind of get a good evaluation of where this Oilers team is at, and if they can keep this up, right? The cynical Oiler follower in me is still so scarred over the last 15, 20 years that it's even hard for me to be like, oh yeah, we're going to keep this up. Like, oh yeah, we're a good team. Right? Like there's still that element of like, well, it's Montreal. They played us hard at the beginning of the year. They played everybody hard, right? So, but no, I like our chances in the 3-game set. So I think at the very least we come out with two or three wins.
And then what do you think about the Toronto doubleheader we got after that? Like, how do you like our chances against Toronto? And my other question is, are we going to see the similar amount of ink spilt post the series with Toronto that we did with the last one? Like, let's say the Oilers blow them out and beat them in both games and outscore them, say like 10-3.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Toronto media going to be writing about that as much as they were the 3-game sweep? Are we going to be as high as we were low from the 3-game sweep?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, right? Obviously, Toronto, Freddie Anderson has been banked up here, and he's not playing very well. But Jack Campbell's kind of come in and looks like a little bit of a, he's taken over the starters net. We'll just keep it simple and say that, right? So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl were pretty pissed off after that 3-game set, and you look at what McDavid's done since then. It's he's the best player in the world for a reason, right? So it's going to be interesting to see the way that they respond. But I think just trying to keep what's in front of us. It's got to keep the focus on this Montreal series right now and see what happens in that 3-game set before we get too far ahead of ourselves.
That's probably fair. So what do you think, High Priest of Oilers Magic? You think after this Montreal series we're going to be saying Sacré Bleu, or are we going to be saying Dommage? Which one?
I'm always wary when the Oilers play Montreal because of Carey Price. It's the Carey Price factor. Although he's never really been the Carey Price of my nightmares when we've played the Habs. So I think our chances are pretty good. They're also without their top guy this year. Montreal's just kind of been hurting more or less the entire season after the hot start. I don't know. I'm expecting at least I'm expecting 2 out of 3, and I don't think that. To me, that Toronto series was still so much of a statistical anomaly that I don't know. I think too much ink was spilt over it in both cities.
For sure.
So I don't know. Toronto just doesn't feel like it. Kind of brings me to a question I want to ask you, Zach. Who do you think our most difficult opponent has been this season? Because to me, it's not the Maple Leafs.
No, I would agree with that. Honestly, I would have to say Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Like I would have to say Winnipeg. Like, yeah, sure. There's probably a little bit of recency bias off the last 2 games, right? But it's felt like, and I think this goes beyond just this season. It's felt like for a while, Winnipeg has always been a hard game for the Oilers, and it's not. I don't mean it's a hard sense and like it's a tough one to go in and win, but like they're tough games. They're tough, grindy games. I got a lot of respect for Paul Maurice as a head coach, full stop. And I think that Winnipeg team is very deep. I think they're very, very well coached, and I think they've been that way for years. So, if I had to say, which team has been the toughest for Edmonton this year, I would have to go with Winnipeg.
Yeah. What about you, Secret Professor?
I think I agree, and I think a big part of that is Hellebuck as well. And also, Winnipeg is one of those teams where, like, when you have a good goalie, it makes. On top of that, it's great to have the team playing a really good system around him. Playing around that good goalie, and Winnipeg does that. I feel like Winnipeg has done a good job of that for a little while. So, whereas you're not perturbed by or the Carey Price that shows up in the Montreal games is not the Carey Price of your nightmares. The Hellebuck is usually quite often, or he has a decent chance of being the Hellebuck of nightmares against us.
Well, it's actually interesting. Something that I've kind of kept an eye on. Connor Hellebuck is actually terrible against the Oilers. He plays his worst hockey against the Edmonton Oilers. Just looking at this season against the Oilers, he's got an .891 save percentage in 4 games. That's the worst.
Shows what I know, but like I don't know. I guess I'm just seeing the 5-star saves and just like
for sure. And I mean, full stop. He's a tremendous. He's a Vezina winning goaltender, right? But when you just peel it back just a little bit, and even over his career, he's only an .899 against the Oilers, which is pretty much among the worst of him against any team. So it's kind of interesting to see that too, because that's where the difference between a bit of numbers and the eye test comes in, because you watch those games and they're hard games, right? Hellebuck always plays the Oilers hard, but he can be a bit of a sieve sometimes against the Oilers, and for whatever reason they seem to have his number a bit.
Jets always play us hard though too. That's another thing. They're like a big, heavy team. It's odd because Toronto is definitely on paper kind of a little bit scarier, but I think Winnipeg is definitely the one to be most scared of. Like, who is that who we're worried about meeting in the Northern Abstraction playoffs? Should we get there? Assuming we get there, which I think we have a 75-85% chance right now.
Yeah, the chances are really good right now. I mean, I would be happy with the first round matchup against Winnipeg, quite frankly, because that is going to be a playoff hockey type of series immediately. It's going to be hard. It's going to be heavy. It's going to be grindy, and you can see the Oilers have the lineup right now to compete with Winnipeg very, very well. So, I think off a 7-game set, Edmonton comes out of that on top, and then you look at probably after that, you're either getting Toronto or Montreal, right? And I think a series against Winnipeg would really prepare the Oilers well to play a series against Toronto or Winnipeg, right? And be able to grind either of those two teams down defensively. I mean, I'm really excited to see Edmonton go up against Toronto again, and in a week from now, because of this newfound defensive game the Oilers seem to have found here over the last 2 or 3 weeks post Toronto. So it's going to be interesting to see the way it kind of shakes out here over the next couple games.
If you were Ken Holland right now today, knowing what you know, what kind of move would you pull prior to the trade deadline, or what would you be looking for in terms of pieces to add? All the difficulties with that notwithstanding, if you had to define areas of high priority, what would you define them as?
I mean, I think the Oilers need some help on the wings. I think they need some help on the middle six wings. I know it might generate a couple of eye rolls, but I keep coming back to a guy like Taylor Hall, just like I did last year. I mean, I think it's. I know. I knew that was coming. I think there's an element there of obvious talent with Taylor Hall. And I think he'd be an ideal fit in that middle six. The money would be hellish to make happen. But I think there's a way the Oilers could be able to pull that off. I mean, you look at the package that New Jersey got last year, right? It was a couple of middling prospects and a first round pick, right?
Sure.
So, Hall's having a very down year this year, as is that entire organization in Buffalo. Could you get Taylor Hall for Dmitry Samarukov and somebody else and a second round pick maybe, right? I mean, you gotta remember, like, the Oilers have got a lot of depth on the defense and a lot of young depth right now, right? Would Buffalo be interested in a guy like Caleb Jones maybe, right? As much as I like Caleb Jones, I think there's a lot of value in him. And as a player, I like him as a raw player, but he just doesn't seem to be gaining the trust of the coaching staff, right? I mean, I think Hall would come in and be a huge impact player on what is already the top scoring offense in the NHL. So I think that's one area. And then I think maybe some bottom six help in the wings, a little bit more size, a little more speed down there, I think would be nice. I don't really see a lot of areas of need right now, to be honest, though, as a whole. I mean, this is a pretty well-rounded Oilers roster. And even when you look at, the guys on the taxi squad, like, they're coming in and giving the Oilers tremendous minutes when they're coming in and playing. They are coming in and giving Edmonton very, very, very valuable minutes. So, Ken Holland's come out and said he doesn't really see it being a very active deadline because of the lack of draft capital the Oilers have right now. I don't really expect there to be much, to be honest. And even throwing Hall out there is a little bit of maybe a fever dream for me.
And then, like, we don't have that much regular season runway left. Do you think things like, how much Tyson Barrie's blown the doors off, maybe how some other defensemen have looked? What's your latest kind of snapshot of where we're looking vis-a-vis the offseason, potentially the expansion draft? Like, do you see a player like Larson staying around, for example? Do you see Ken Holland going big game hunting? for that top six winger that we need? Do you see him maybe buying out a player like a James Neal or a Koskinen? Is any of that in the cards?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any and or all of that could be in the cards. Obviously, you got to re-sign Nugent Hopkins. So that's priority number one this offseason is getting that done. Tyson Barrie, I think he could stick around for sure in Edmonton. I think you got to make a push to re-sign him. It's going to be a tough negotiation. It's going to be tough. I think Edmonton needs to come at it with the mindset of, well, look, Tyson, you are playing the best hockey of your entire NHL career right now, and you've never had a fit as good in the NHL as you do right now. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to commit to Edmonton and you want to commit to playing somewhere with guys that you can succeed with, you got to take a team-friendly deal. Full stop. I think that's the exact way the conversation needs to go. I think he needs to take a deal in the $4.5 million, $5 million range.
I think 5 would be fine. How would you feel about like 5 times 5? I mean, actually, for a defenseman of that ilk, that's still actually a pretty team friendly deal. All things considered, a defenseman that can push to be top 5, top 10 in scoring every year.
A little concern over the length, right? I mean, Barry's 29, 30.
Yeah, it would be one of those deals though where you're kind of factoring in, okay, well, we'll just buy him out in the second to last or last year. Like a lot of these guys get deals like that. You're kind of just doing a napkin calculation of, okay, we're going to get him for $5 million for 3 years, and then we can start to think about buying him out because that might not be that painful at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it all comes down to the way the contract breaks down too in a situation like that, right? With signing bonuses and money owed. I mean, I'm not a fan of buying guys out in the first place, really.
Sure.
But I think maybe try and get them around 3 years at that dollar value. Maybe have to bump it up to 5.5. I mean, my big concern with a guy like Barrie is stunting the growth of Ethan Bear or Evan Bouchard, mainly Bouchard, right? Because I think Bouchard can do everything that Tyson Barrie can do as an NHL player, as a mold of a player. And I think Bouchard can do it better than Barrie can, because I think Bouchard is more responsible defensively and has that ability to play well in his own zone, whereas Barrie is an absolute tire fire there. So I think those are kind of some of the key points with that, right? So it's going to be an interesting negotiation. And then Adam Larsson, I mean, he's really surprised me this year.
And he's connected to Barrie in my mind. Like a lot of people have pointed this out. If you have a Tyson Barrie, you probably want someone like an Adam Larsson, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like I said, I've been pleasantly surprised by how well Adam Larsson's played. Seems like he's finally healthy. And I think that's really, really important. Over the last couple of years, he's dealt with some back injuries and his play. So seeing a refreshed, renewed Adam Larsson, again, it's a difficult situation. I think if there was a guy the Oilers would let walk, it would be Larsson. I think because that's a little bit easier to replace from within. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm not quite accurate in saying that, but I think you have to really be careful. I mean, you've got some other important signings to make this offseason too. Like, what do you do with Kyler Yamamoto? He's an RFA this year.
Yeah.
Right.
Good question.
Do you lock him up long term at $4 or $5 million? I mean, the goaltending situation, Edmonton needs to find a sure, like Edmonton, easier said than done. Edmonton needs to find their Andre Vasilevsky, right?
Mm.
Like they need to find that surefire number one goaltender that they can rely on and they can count on, right? Again, easier said than done, but those are kind of the priorities for me this offseason, I think, is trying to find that number one surefire guy in net.
On that point, Zach, what would you say Mike Smith's chances are at taking home the Vezina Trophy at the end of this season?
Very interesting question. I haven't had a chance to look at the numbers, but I think, there's an argument to be made for him to be in that conversation at the very least. Where he might get bit is games played and wins versus some of the other goaltenders. Obviously, Smith had missed what was it, the first 15 games of the season or something like that.
He did.
15 games, right? So I think that might hurt his chances a little bit, but I mean, he is having a Vezina caliber season. He really is. He is looking pretty good.
I mean, the fact that he was coming off of a injury, to me, coupled with his age, to me, that doesn't necessarily hurt his chances. If he keeps up the caliber of play that we've been seeing, I think things like that could actually sweeten the pot for voters.
Well, we do know one thing about Vezina voters, and they love games played and they love wins. They like to vote for guys that are the workhorse, that are the surefire number one. I mean, you look at Hellebuck last year, right? He played like 70 games throughout the season and had like 35-40 wins under his belt on a not very good Winnipeg team last year that really struggled defensively. I do agree. I think there's an argument to be made for sure of him being in that conversation. I'd be pretty surprised if he won the Vezina though.
Would you be surprised if he was nominated?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I could see him being in the top 5 conversation for it for sure. I could see him in that conversation because he is playing great hockey right now. Sure, he still has, a stinker game here or there, but every goalie does in the NHL. It's not an easy league to play in, right? But he's consistently giving the Oilers very, very good minutes. And his, you guys know me, I'm a big analytics guy, and his underlying numbers have been fairly solid this year. One of my favorite things to look at is goals saved in comparison to the expectation. And he's been doing very good in that sense this year. So he's been stopping a lot of pucks that analytically should be going in. So that's definitely an interesting conversation.
I want to play a little like game show style, just like lightning round here. Okay, so we got a boatload of RFAs and UFAs coming up this year. Yeah. And Zach, you're dialed into the matrix. You've interfaced your brain with the enterprise computer, a la Barkley in the Nth Degree episode. So if I just like read out a name, tell you their UFA or RFA status, I want you to just say the number off the top of your head, whether that number is in the millions or just zero, or even in like the negative territory. Okay. So we got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, UFA. Yeah,
$6 million area.
Alex Chiasson, UFA.
I'd like to see him come back 1 year, $1.5 million, $1 million.
Jujhar Khaira, RFA.
Yeah, got to keep him around. He'll get a QO. He'll get a league minimum contract.
Tyler Ennis, UFA.
Yeah, same thing. Keep him around year or two, $1 million to $2 million range.
Dominic Rory Calhoun.
Yeah, I think as a raw talent, there's a player there. He's really struggled in my eyes this year. He would be a guy I might be comfortable. I mean, he's an RFA, so you'd be able to retain his rights, but that's an interesting conversation to have. I think you could maybe get him around back for $1 million as a bottom 6 player, though.
Gaetan Haas, the Swiss Army knife of Swiss hockey players.
Lock him up 6x6. Superstar. No, he's actually great though. Huge fan of Gaetan Haas. He's going to be a priority bottom 6 re-signing this year. Again, bought a lot of bottom 6 guys here. So again, in that $1 million to $2 million range, but
which is a good sign.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a good sign if you have a bunch of guys making under $1.5 million that you want to re-sign again, and you think you can get for things like league minimum. That's a good sign that your team's been playing pretty well and you're getting good value out of for guys.
And Gaetan Haas is an incredible defensive player. He is very, very, very good. So I think he's a guy you absolutely have to prioritize keeping around.
Zach, Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go first. Go.
Oh, I was going to say, what do you think the chances are that the Oilers will see fans in the building in April? Because I saw a press release or some tweet or something that was alluding to the fact that it was a possibility, that it was something being discussed. What do you think the chances are of that happening?
Slim to none, honestly. I think there's a ways to go I know the OEG has been pushing for it. I know they've been working behind the scenes to try and get fans in. In my eyes, it's too soon for that unless you're talking about only having fully vaccinated people in there, healthcare
Could be.
workers. If that's a situation where you can make it happen, then sure. Let's get some fans in there. Beyond that, I have a really, really hard time seeing any fans being in there. So, I think we might be projecting a little bit towards, next season, maybe midway through the year before we can really start to get large numbers of fans. And when we talk about, getting fans into the buildings, it's directly correlated to the vaccination rollout.
Yes,
right.
It is.
So, until we can see, yeah, it should be, so I think until we can see a lot more vaccinations getting taken care of here in Alberta, it's going to be a little while.
Secret Professor, what do you say?
Chances of the fans being in the building?
Yeah.
I don't see it happening this season. No.
I do see it happening this season in very limited numbers for the playoffs.
For the playoffs. Those tickets are going to be going for a king's ransom.
It's not going to be, and I'm saying it's not going to be a situation where tickets are on sale. It's going to be something
for nurses and people like that. Yeah.
It's going to be something where it's first responders or some sort of vaccine something. It's not going to be a situation where I can go to a game if I haven't been vaccinated yet. There's going to be some sort of parameters in place, but I will say that I do believe there will be some number of fans, very limited number of fans in the building for the playoffs.
I think just to make it interesting, we should have nurses, first responders, maybe teachers, and then just mix Milan Lucic fans in too. People that have just had a hard time lately,
Yeah, I mean, ideally that'd be the way to do it. You definitely want, for fair representation, you'd want a few people in the stands that would throw their jerseys on the ice at the end of the game, right?
Or start a few fist fights. You want to keep it a little bit interesting.
Yes, but I do think there'll be fans in the building for a playoff run.
Zach, you're a news director for the Nation News Network. I hope I didn't butcher that. Is it national director or news director? National news director?
News director and senior columnist for the Nation, Oilers Nation, and the Nation Network.
Like I said, you're plugged into the matrix. I'm sure you're following a bunch of stories right now. You follow a bunch of different teams. What are the most interesting stories you're following, league wide right now, off the top of your head?
Obviously Ovechkin's goal chase. So keeping that in the back of the mind. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening out east right now in the United States division. Chicago, they've been on a bit of a run this year. What's going to happen there? Obviously they're a pretty veteran-based team, and we saw what happened last year in the bubble. They came in and took Edmonton out. But there's a couple other interesting, chases going on there too, with Columbus and with Carolina. Those are some really, really good teams. Columbus is surging right now, and Seth Jones is finally playing up to his potential this season. So those are a couple ones that I'm kind of keeping tuned in on, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens out west in the states too. Obviously, LA and they're having a season better than I think they expected, and so it's going to be interesting to see. The deadline stuff is really fascinating to me, to be honest. It's going to be really interesting to see the way that starts to shake out, and especially with the border and how that's going to impact the ability, or maybe the willingness for teams to be making moves.
Such a great point, because there are teams. I mean, I don't think necessarily we're the Oilers are that team, but I think that there are teams that are going to be in a position where one move could really help them. You know what I mean? And they're going to try to figure out a way to make that happen. If there's any window there, they're going to take a run at the window. So I think trade deadline this year is going to be extremely exciting, just because the amount of moving parts that are in it, it's unprecedented.
Yeah, I mean, I think Toronto is going to be a fun team to keep an eye on. I mean, Sheldon Keefe came out, last week, 2 weeks ago, and basically said that we're all in on this team right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because what we know about Sheldon Keefe is he likes to make moves a little bit early. He doesn't hesitate to do that. You look at the Jake Muzzin acquisition last year, which happened like a month and a half, 2 months before the trade deadline. I could see him, making a move here sooner rather than later. But in the same breath, I mean, they're a team that's on an absolute skid right now, and they're supposed to be number one goaltender is not looking like a number one goaltender. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things to watch there. I know the Leafs are scouting a lot of different teams in the league right now, so it's going to be interesting to see the way that shakes out.
I think it's going to be a very panicky trade deadline. There's going to be a lot of panic moves.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, it's just such a fascinating year. There's going to be some really awesome case studies, I hope, that come out of this NHL season. Because you look at the way teams have changed. Like again, I come back to like an LA, or mainly like LA. Like, they're an older team, right? Like Dustin Brown and Drew Doughty, like these guys are 35 years old.
How good is Todd McClellan looking right now, by the way, as a coach?
I mean, I still have a lot of reservations about him from what happened in Edmonton and that sort of a thing, but he is looking good. I mean, he's got a veteran roster, and if there's one thing we know about Todd McClellan is he loves his veterans. So, seeing Dustin Brown and Drew Doughty playing like they're 25 instead of 35 is really interesting. This extra time off has been really interesting to see the way it's impacted these players and given them that time to really rejuvenate and have this youthful exuberance late in their careers.
Yeah.
The Kings also have the best jerseys we've seen in like the past 30 years. So
they got great jerseys. I love that reverse retro purple and yellow that they got.
It's insane.
And same thing with Minnesota. If we're talking reverse retros, those are just absolutely filthy. So there's been some elite jerseys out there.
I like our reverse retros too. I did want to do a quick shout out. Thank you to the idealistic pragmatist, person after my own heart. Thank you for becoming a patron of Handkerchief Dynasty and moving us closer towards our dreams of A, upgrading our Zoom license to Pro, and B, equipping the Genji glove and the offering together to be able to make 8 consecutive melee attacks. So thank you, idealistic pragmatist. I'm glad to see people actually melding idealism and pragmatism, because in my mind, they should not be so divided. They should really be more closely associated. So if you want to become a patron and access our fun bonus content, we had a podcast meeting last night. We're already planning our first premium episode. It's going to be a hell of a show. Be sure to join us at patreon.com/Handkerchief Dynasty. Zach, I'll just give you the last word and be sure to tell people where they can follow you as well.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on, guys. It's always a blast. I love
we got to do it more often. Like, we should just check in again in a couple of weeks. Same time,
absolutely.
same place, same bat channel.
People can find me OilersNation.com. They can also find me on Twitter. That's the easiest way, where I am gifting and yelling and tweeting and having a grand old time at Zach Laing on Twitter.
Let me just interject. Is Marc Bergevin the most memeable GM of a Canadian team right now?
Yes, right now, yes, most definitely. Yeah. I mean, he's absolutely tremendous in the memes. My favorite still is a couple years ago at the trade deadline, where he walked past all of the TSN cameras holding a giant plant to hide himself. Like, it's like that kind of content is just, it's absolutely elite. So, and he's also like super muscular and really strong. So like, he's just jacked. So I know it's incredible. So yeah, he's a great GM to meme. But I mean, if we're talking all-time memeable GMs, I mean, Craig McTavish, like he's right up there, right? Visually better and all that sort of stuff. There's some very meme-worthy GMs out there.
Cool. Well, yeah, we'll check in a few weeks. Let's all just enjoy this. Like, we're not going to see another 3-game series against the Montreal Canadiens, barring a playoff meeting, for a very, very long time. So let's just enjoy it with some fine wine. Maybe you can pay a small corking fee to bring your own wine to the game tonight.
Why not?
But as always, gentlemen, thank you so much for talking. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please like and subscribe. Please share us widely with your friends and neighbors. And then, after that, just go and live for you. The time will be yours after that point. So, all right, we'll catch you all very soon, and take care.
Peace and love.
Bye-bye.